The snow had only just begun to surrender, peeling back from the earth in slow, muddy veins as spring whispered through the Wyoming territory. The early morning air was sharp enough to bite, yet soft enough to promise change. Thus clung stubbornly to the weather-worn boards of the Brandt Ranch farmhouse, as chimney smoke curled into a sky just beginning to warm from its wintry hush. Avery guided her mare carefully through the rutted path, her gloved hands steady on the reins, breath misted from both horse and rider, pale puffs that vanished into the cold. She halted at the front gate, dismounted into a slush of thawed snow and mud, and climbed the rough-hewn steps leading to the side kitchen door. Her heart thudded against her ribs as she reached up and knocked once, firmly on the splintered wood. No answer came. The Brandt kitchen was a place whispered about in town, a place quiet in sound, and quieter in sentiment. It had earned its silence from the man who owned it. Avery swallowed hard, nerves coiling low in her stomach, then knocked again. This time with more certainty. The door creaked open. Cole Brandt stood there, tall as a pine and just as rigid. His broad frame filled the doorway, his features grizzled and severe, touched with gray at the temples. His eyes, the color of storm-worn stone, scanned her face with wary calculation. He spoke with no warmth, only blunt precision. "Who are you?" Avery lifted her chin. Her voice didn't waver. "I'm June. I've come to take over breakfast for my mother. She's ill and needs rest. If you'll allow me, I'd like to cook for you this morning." He didn't answer right away. His gaze stayed locked on hers hard, assessing. No one had told him her name, only that the old cook had taken sick and someone new would be sent in her place. He hadn't asked for it, hadn't wanted it. He'd expected trouble. Instead, here was a slip of a girl, no more than 19, with a spine of quiet steel and eyes full of fatigue and grit. Grief lingered in the shadows of her face, but something stronger kept her upright. He gave a curt nod. One day, a flicker of relief crossed her expression. Her lips curved into a small, grateful smile. "Thank you, sir. I won't disappoint." She stepped inside without hesitation. He nudged the door shut behind her, and silence fell like a blanket. The kitchen smelled faintly of cold ashes and stale grease, the scent of work long done and half forgotten. June set her satchel on the table and unpacked it with careful hands. Fresh eggs, wild onion, bundles of dried herbs. She rolled up her sleeves and moved with practiced ease. Eggs cracked open in even, fluid strokes. Herbs were crushed, measured, folded into meat stew already beginning to simmer. She stirred without mess or hesitation. Every movement was purposeful, as if the kitchen belonged to her and had for years. Cole lingered in the doorway, arms crossed, eyes narrowed, a man not used to being impressed. He had braced for disaster, for smoke and spilled broth and flustered explanations. Instead, he watched as his kitchen came alive to bubbling gently, skillet hissing, the air filling with the quiet confidence of her touch. His brow furrowed, not with displeasure but with confusion. She wasn't what he'd expected. June glanced over her shoulder once, sensing him watching, but said nothing. She ladled meat and thick gravy into a blackened cast-iron pot and placed it on the table, with the reverence of a church offering. Then she cracked eggs into a pan and whisked until they shimmered like sunrise. A slice of toasted bread accompanied each plate. It wasn't fancy, but it was honest, and it smelled like warmth. The scent crept into the next room, where Cole still stood, unmoving. He stepped forward finally, reached for the ladle, and filled a spoon. The steam fogged his face as he lifted it to his lips. The first taste stopped him, savory, tender, with herbs he didn't recognize, wild things that opened up somewhere deep in his chest. It felt like a memory, though he couldn't name it. It felt like something good. He looked at her, and in that moment, saw more than just the girl behind the stove. She stood with her back straight, her breathing quiet, pretending not to hope. He turned without a word, walked out then, as if reconsidering, stepped back and set down a small pitcher of milk on the table with a soft clink. June's breath caught. He met her gaze. Briefly, something passed between them, acknowledgement, perhaps, and then he was gone again. She turned back to the skillet and plated the eggs and toast as the ranch hands filtered in. Their boots scraped the floor, their hats tipped low with skepticism. They stared at the plates, at the girl who wasn't their usual cook, Whispers floated around her like smoke, but they sat. One of them poked a cornbread muffin with a doubtful grunt. Bet it's dry as Kansas. He took a bite, paused, then took another. Not bad, he muttered, and passed the plate. Others followed. Forks clinked, spoons dipped into stew, and the room slowly filled with quiet eating. No jokes, no jabs, only the low, murmured affirmations of hunger satisfied. Good. Tastes like home. June didn't smile, but her hands moved a little steadier. She cleared plates silently and began washing dishes in the corner. Hands working through suds with steady rhythm. Cole watched from the edge of the room. He never ate with them, but he lingered longer than usual. He said, "That was good." She looked up, caught off guard by the rare words. Her voice was small, but clear. "Thank you, sir." He nodded once, then turned and left. But at the door, he looked back over his shoulder, just once, then disappeared into the sun-streaked corridor. That morning, something shifted, not loudly, not in the way storms do, but quietly, like ice melting beneath your boots. The next day, June woke before the sun. Pale morning light kissed the frost-dusted window as she dressed in silence and stepped into the kitchen, sewing needle and scrap cloth in hand. She crouched at the torn corner of the curtain and stitched it closed with even strokes, the thread tugging the fabric whole again. Outside, horses huffed clouds of breath into the cold. She grabbed a barn fork and cleared the troughs of snow, making sure the water was clean and reachable. Behind her, a door creaked. Cole appeared with a steaming mug of coffee. He didn't speak. He watched her, then set the mug down and briefly touched the handle of the fork she'd left in the snow. Then he walked away. Back inside, June prepared blueberry pie flour, eggs, wild-picked berries, and a splash of fresh milk from the bottle he had brought the day before. She added cinnamon, slow and careful, then turned to scrub the counters, each movement a kind of prayer. By breakfast, the kitchen was warm with the smell of pie and coffee. Ranch hands came in, rubbed sleep from their eyes. Cole leaned casually against the doorframe, his arms not crossed this time, just resting. When she sliced the pie and passed steaming plates around the table, there were no jokes, only surprise, gratitude, even pleasure. Later that morning, June stepped out to the barn to stack firewood. A double cord waited for her. She grabbed what she could manage, arms straining with the weight. Then suddenly Cole appeared, wordless, and lifted the heaviest logs with quiet efficiency, placing them alongside hers. They worked together in silence, not awkward, not distant, just easy. Companionable. That evening, when June nicked her hand, slicing bread, the sharp metal slipping just a little too quick, she gasped and stepped back. Blood welled along her palm. The room tilted with pain and the sting of surprise. Before she could think, Cole was at her side. His hands were surprisingly gentle, pressing a cloth to her wound, easing her hand under cold water. She didn't speak. Neither did he. The fire crackled beside them when he wrapped the linen around her palm. Her fingers brushed his. They both stilled. She whispered, "Thank you, sir." He touched her wrist. "Your pulse is good. You sit with them tonight. I'll tend the stew." June blinked, startled, then nodded. That evening she sat at the table, cloth still wrapped around her hand, eating stew she had not cooked. Cole brought her a bowl, placed it gently before her, and held her gaze longer than usual. She smiled. After the meal, she reached for her bowl. He stopped her, took it from her hands and walked it to the sink himself. As he washed it, their fingers touched again. A pause, a glance. Then he refilled her pitcher with milk before leaving without a word. June stood at the sink, rinsing her hands in warm water, her heart fluttering with something quiet and full. Days passed like that. Small gestures, no declarations, but signs of something building, layered like pie crust, stitched like curtains, settled like firewood stacked for winter. One evening, snow pushed against the window panes, thick and insistent. June pulled a golden pie from the wood-fired oven and set it by the hearth to cool. She sat nearby, warming her hands. Cole stepped in without a sound. He didn't sit at the table. He chose the bench near the fire near her. "My mother used to make this," she offered. Said it warmed hearts when the frost got to everyone. He didn't respond right away. Then, someone I loved used to bake pies like that. She pressed a grain of wheat into the crust. For good fortune, the fire snapped. June held her breath. "I'm sorry," she said gently. He nodded once, not looking at her. Later, as she washed their cups, she saw a small piece of carved wood, tucked beneath a stone by the hearth. A wheat stalk, delicately etched. She turned, breath catching. He stood with his back to her, but she knew. She knelt and picked it up, running her fingers over the rough grain. "Thank you," she whispered. "It's for protection," he said, "for whoever makes this place warm." She stepped toward him, placed a hand gently on his arm. "It means more than you know." He didn't speak, but he didn't pull away. A week later, the day was warm with autumn light. June stirred a simmering pot of stew with a heaviness she couldn't shake. In her apron pocket, her mother's letter lay folded, the final lines still echoing. "My fever's back. I need you home soon." Cole stepped in. She handed him a bowl without looking up. "My mother's worse," she said softly. He stared at the bowl. "After this week, then?" She nodded, throat tight. "Yes, sir. I have to go." The room felt hollow. That night, the hands ate in silence. Even the fire was quieter, flickering low. Cole didn't speak as she cleared the last plate. He came to the door as she washed dishes, hands sunk in soapy water. She straightened. "I'll leave Friday at dawn," she said. His voice was quiet. "There are people who come through, warm a place, and pass on. I'm used to that." But he didn't leave, and neither did his gaze. He turned slowly and walked to the door, his silhouette drawn in deep relief against the flicker of lamplight. "Make your trip well," he said, voice low. June stood frozen, dishcloth limp in her hand, the clatter of the water long forgotten. Her eyes, blurred with quiet ache, followed him until he disappeared beyond the frame. He never looked back. She resumed washing, each plate an anchor to keep her from shattering. Her tears slid hot across her cold cheeks, mingling with soap. And silence. That night, sleep did not come. She lay on the narrow cot in the guest room above the kitchen, listening to the wind swirl through the eaves, curling around the ranch house like a memory trying to come home. Her mind ran circles around itself. Had she simply been another guest? A warm moment soon extinguished, like smoke rising from an untended fire. By morning, she was sweeping leaves from the porch, the bristles scratching against the boards in slow, rhythmic strokes. Her saddlebags sat pat beside the doorway, but she hadn't yet made the walk to the barn. She lingered, making one last fire, coaxing warmth into the hearth as if she could burn into it some remnant of herself. The scent of pine and ironwood filled the kitchen as she moved through her final acts of care. Later, she stepped outside, bucket in hand, to freshen water for the horses. The barn door groaned in welcome. She filled the troughs, murmuring to the mares as if they could understand the goodbye she wouldn't say aloud. When she returned to the kitchen, her breath caught. By the hearth, there stood a neat stack of split, damp firewood, still glistening from the morning dew, freshly cut. The kitchen was thick with the scent of pine and coals. She stood still, the warmth not only from the fire but from the thought, the care. It wrapped around her like a shawl. At midday, Cole appeared at the doorway, thus clung to his coat, and the fatigue of a long night showed in the faint slack of his shoulders. Yet his face was bare of its usual guarded weight. He said nothing, just stood there, watching her with the weight of unspoken thoughts. June turned, setting the kettle down. She lowered her eyes, stealing for the moment he would walk away again. But he didn't. Instead, his voice came quiet, hesitant. "I worked last night." Her brows drew together. "What?" He shifted. "Before midnight. Thought everything be fine. But the porch was soft, the roof still leaking. I didn't want you leaving in the rain." June stepped forward, her breath catching. "You did that for me." He nodded once, gaze unwavering. "For what you planted here." Her breath stilled. That stack of firewood wasn't just fuel. It was apology. It was memory. It was care. He hadn't fought her leaving, but he'd fought the cold she might remember. Not for convenience, for kindness. They stood in silence, the crackle of the fire speaking for them. Rain or snow had once threatened the roof. She had once threatened to leave. He had rebuilt what she might carry with her, not to stop her, but to honor her. June reached out, hand resting over his, voice unsteady but firm. "Thank you." Cole swallowed, then said quietly, "Stay as long as you can." She blinked fast. "But my mother." He nodded. "Family is family. But you don't have to go hungry to care for her." The wind stirred outside, rattling the kitchen window. They held hands still. She would leave, they both knew. But she would leave slower, and she would leave knowing something more. And in that pause, in that shared silence, something deep and wordless was planted. The next morning, after June's departure, Cole sat alone at the long wooden table. It had once echoed with her soft laughter and the gentle rhythm of daily comfort. Now, the dawn light struggled through soot-smudged panes, painting long, pale streaks through motes of dust that hung like ghosts. A plate of dry biscuits and ham lay before him. He chewed without taste, his hunger drowned by a hollowness he hadn't named yet. Around him, the ranch hands clattered forks against plates, chatting about feed and fence lines. They didn't notice his silence. Cole rose abruptly and moved to the drawer near the counter. He pulled it open slowly. There it was, a folded piece of paper, his name written on the front, in June's hand, that firm, tidy scrawl with a flick at the tail of the E. He stared for a long second, then opened it. Inside, a recipe for plum pie, notated with smudges and crossed out measurements. But beneath, the last line, she had written something else. "Thank you for letting me care for your kitchen. And maybe, just a little, for your heart." He traced the words with a trembling finger. Read them again, then again, lips parting to whisper them. Memory bloomed around him, her hands kneading dough, her laughter in the quiet, her careful touch on every corner of this kitchen. His eyes welled. For the first time since his wife had died, he allowed the grief to rise, no longer holding it back with silence. She had softened the edges of loss, and now, even in her absence, she left behind warmth. He folded the note carefully and slid it into his pocket. Then he stood and walked out into the morning. The wind met him, but this time, it didn't bite. That evening, he returned to the kitchen, pulled the recipe from his pocket, measured flour, rolled dough, laughed once when sugar spilled. He baked June's plum pie, and when it was done, and the crust was golden, and the scent filled the air, he took one generous slice and ate slowly, reverently. It tasted of her, of memory, of something worth waiting for. A few weeks passed. One spring afternoon, Cole rode into the dusty main street of June's hometown. A cluster of shops sat warm beneath the mid-afternoon sun. His eyes settled on a new storefront with a hand-painted sign above the door, "Avery's Table." He dismounted, fingers steady on the reins. In his other hand, he held a pie dish wrapped in cloth. He stepped forward. June's mother was setting chairs outside, her gray curls bouncing as she turned. Her smile, when she saw him, was immediate. "Oh my," she breathed, drawing him into a firm embrace. She smelled of lavender and something like coming home. "Thank you for bringing this, Mr. Brandt." Cole nodded, then looked up. June stood behind the counter inside, framed by sunlight and steam. Her hair was pinned back, her hands dusted in flour. When she saw him, she stilled. Her breath caught. The room slowed. He stepped inside, placing the pie on the counter. "Good afternoon, ma'am," he said, voice thick. She tried to speak, faltered. Then, "You didn't have to." He cut in gently. "I wanted to. It's your plum pie. First thing my kitchen smelled like after you left. Warmth again." Her eyes shimmered. She glanced to her mother, who gave a soft nod. Cole stepped closer. "I don't know if your kitchen has room for a rancher, but I brought wood, and I can stay." June looked down at the pie. Her fingers brushed his. "There's always room," she said, voice barely more than a whisper. "For wood, and for you." He smiled, a real one, rare and full. They sat, shared coffee and pie, the air between them quiet, but full. The old pain faded like dusk, and in its place, something tender grew, not loud, not rushed. Just real. The town's bakery, Avery's Table, grew over the year. It became the heart of the street. A wooden sign, carved with a golden sheaf of wheat, marked its entrance, a symbol they had designed together. June baked each morning, the scent of cornbread and cinnamon welcoming guests. Cole tended the tables, his strong hands now used for smoothing wood and arranging flowers. Her mother whereupon scarves on the porch. By midday, the place buzzed with life. Children giggled. Travelers warmed their hands on mugs of cider. Locals pointed at the chalkboard menu: June's heirloom cornbread and Cole's ranch house bliss stew. Their story etched in specials and served in bowls. One afternoon, as the last customer left, June touched Cole's shoulder. "The hearth is warm today," she said. He looked up. "Might be the wood," she smiled. "Or you." He reached up, brushing a curl behind her ear. "Thank you for keeping this place burning." Her mother entered with a whereupon scarf. "For Cole," she said, wrapping it gently. Homecoming warmth. The sun sank low, bathing the bakery in golden hush. Cole and June stood hand in hand. The porch light flickered on. Behind them, the hearth glowed. It had never just been a kitchen. It was a place to begin again. And as stars blinked overhead, June leaned close. "It is warm because of you," she whispered. And he stayed, just like love, quiet, unshakable, true.